Welcome everyone to the Kaizen Fitness Show, and I'm super excited today because I'm going to be interviewing Zaynah Ahmad, who has founded Volt Elements, a men's skincare brand that is available all throughout New Zealand. She's done extremely well. I've had the pleasure of knowing Zaynah for about 3 years now, three to 4 years, and it's been really exciting seeing her growth as a businesswoman and as an entrepreneur. So I'm really excited to have Zaynah on the show. So Zaynah, how are you doing?
Oh, that was really nice. Thanks, Jordan. I am doing pretty well. I think every week that we have been in lockdown, things keep getting a little bit better. You get a little bit more used to being in this environment. So um, definitely things are looking up.
Awesome to hear. And there's kind of like two main topics I want to talk about today. The first one is about yourself and about your mental fitness and how you found being an entrepreneur in Wellington and in New Zealand, and talking about your journey there, but also in regards to today's situation with COVID-19, I want to talk a little bit more about self-care and if people are still taking care of themselves while they're in self-isolation. Because obviously running a men's skincare business like you are, you may have a bit of insight into that area. But first off, I just want to talk a little bit more about yourself, just to give the listener a bit of an idea of your journey so far. So I remember talking to you, I think it was last year, and you're saying how with Volt Elements and this whole kind of entrepreneurial effort, you've always kind of strived to do something a little bit different. And I remember you talking about selling iPhones while you're in art class or something like that. So tell me a little bit more about this kind of entrepreneurial drive that you've always had and where it's come from.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where it comes from because a lot of my other entrepreneur friends, they have families that are in business or that their uncle or auntie owns like the local shop or something. But with me, a lot of the people that I'm around, they're all career people. They're all people that have gone from school straight to university, got a good job, and are now looking to buy their first house. With me, I think the things that I can now reflect back on, so this is from when I was in college, and what I can now see is myself being a bit different from the rest of my friends, is that I was always like picking and dropping off classes. So like one year I'd be like, this is the year I'm going to do accounting and physics, realize hated accounting, hated physics. Yeah. And I would be like, this is the year I'm going to do art and photography. Realized art was fun, but I hated just being pressured to do it. Photography was great, but I wasn't going to make much money out of doing it. So with me, I remember like using those times to sort of just understand like what I enjoyed, and what I realized is I enjoyed a lot of those things, but not at a huge detail or at a huge depth. And I remember just like my brain would often be like at the back of my book, like drawing or like somewhere else. And I'd get all my work done, but I'd get it done in 15 minutes so that the rest of the time I could be off daydreaming about something else. One of the most distinctive times that you just mentioned was that I remember sitting in art class and we were doing graphic design, and I was bent upon wanting to import iPhones into New Zealand.
Yeah.
Weren't available at all in New Zealand, and I remember like going onto Amazon and figuring out the price differences and things like that and trying to get it in. And those types of experiences happen to me quite often. So it went from iPhones, like 6 months later it was me trying to bring in clothes from like cheap clothes from China, sell them in New Zealand and things like that. So I must have been about 17 at that point, maybe 16. And I remember also just like hustling a lot. So every now and again, I've always had lots of side hustles happening. So a few years ago, you know how now on everyone's phone, they've got those like stands.
Yep.
Like, yeah. So, like you hook your finger into it. I bought like 20 of those from AliExpress for like $1, and I sold them at work for $10. And they
Wow.
sold to multiple people. So like that was just a way, and it's not about the money. It's not about making the sale. It's just the high that you get from being able to meet someone's need and provide it to them. And I think going from a background of really enjoying that, doing a lot of customer service roles, so I've worked for like PlayStation and learning about like what these companies want you to put across to those prospective customers. It's about selling the experience. I really enjoy doing that, and the challenge behind it. And the bonus, I think, is just being able to work to your own hours and how you want things to go. So how my journey went is that I've got, as you know, very strict Asian parents, very much, go to school, get a job, get married, all that sort of stuff. I'm the middle child, so sometimes they forget about me, which is something which can work in my favor. Probably why I've been able to do this. So my whole life where I've been having to work full time, I've always had something going on the side. Whether it's like mystery shopping, so that's basically, for those of you that are not familiar with it, you basically are hired by a larger company, and they are instructed by, for example, JB Hi-Fi or a cinema to basically, people go in with specific criteria that they need to go and find out, are the people who are working there adhering to that criteria. So it could be things like Jordan needs to upsell the loyalty card program, and I sort of write it down. I really enjoyed that. It was quite interesting to understand why it's so important to make sure that you have got consistent selling within your people as well. So did that a lot. I've had up to 3 or 4 side hustles running at once. I have, and that includes volunteering and stuff. I think it's just a variety of things that I really enjoy. So where I am at now is, a few years ago, I had stopped doing any entrepreneurial stuff for a couple of years, right? And I remember leaving this job, which was very structured, from a very well-known company. It had pretty much sucked the life out of me. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to leave this job because I have this inner feeling that I'm going to do entrepreneurship, but I have no idea what I'm going to do it in. I just had this feeling. So I thought to myself, okay, this feeling wasn't going away. And what I decided is, what do I need to do in order to get by, continuing to explore entrepreneurship, but still being able to get by financially? So what I did is I basically got a new job, which allowed me to have a little bit more flexibility. It wasn't as crazy as that previous job, and the pay was a bit better, so I could explore in terms of buying and selling and things like that. So I did that, and that went quite well. That's sort of when Elements came to mind, and I started to see, this would have been about 4 years ago. I started seeing a lot of that typical hipster guy walking around. And I started hearing a lot of my male friends and my brother even talking about how they'd go to their particular barber. It cost them a lot of money, but he gives them amazing service. And, how are the other guys getting that cool haircut with the fade and all that sort of stuff? I'd also see, nowadays you see a lot of guys spending loads of money on Air Jordans and I Love Ugly stuff and all sorts of things. So you could see that was sort of the beginning of it, and now we've kind of reached it's quite common to see that sort of modern man. So I thought, okay, this was really interesting. I also thought that there was a real gap in the market for guys going through skin problems, because I've seen a lot of my male friends, my family members, go through days where their skin was not good and they are not feeling confident. And as a woman, I could probably just slap on some concealer to hide it. But as a man, from a societal perspective, you just have to front it, right? And you just have to deal with it. So I thought that was really unfair. I thought it was also unfair that guys wouldn't be able to talk that freely about beauty and things like that. But I could see from a global perspective that things were picking up. And so basically I started exploring what a modern men's skincare range would look like. And that's sort of where we are today. So we've got, like you said before, we've got our range that's now stocked within New Zealand, and we co-designed with real guys to make sure that we're providing a service that actually works. So that's a bit about my journey.
That's super cool, Zaynah, and it's really cool listening to all of the little kind of side hustles you have, because I feel like with a lot of entrepreneurs I've talked with and business owners, there's always kind of that intrinsic drive to be a little bit different from everyone else. You know, when everyone's running in one direction, you need to be running in the opposite direction. And a couple of things really stuck out with me with what you said. You said the first, you really loved kind of solving someone's problem. If they had a need, you liked to be the kind of person to solve that need for them, right? So I think that's huge. In kind of any business effort, it's really important to kind of identify a pain point within society or within a certain demographic and then provide the solution for that. That's obviously kind of marketing and business to a T. But also the other interesting thing is a lot of people may have that fear in their brains, particularly young people, that if they go on this kind of entrepreneurial route, their parents are going to be terrified of the fact that they're not studying and going through university and getting a good job and getting security. And obviously a lot of that comes from a place of love. A lot of parents, want their kids to not, go bankrupt or whatever. But despite having really strict parents in regards to kind of the whole structure of things, you still decided to pursue it, which has been really cool, and it's been really successful for you. So I guess you found that niche of men, and you were in touch with society a little bit, and the fact that it is starting to shift to the point where men are now a little bit more accepted to be using kind of face care products and stuff like that. So talk a little bit more about that and kind of where you see society moving towards.
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of interviews with real guys, right? So like guys between, and the modern man doesn't really have an age, so, all the way from like 18 to like plus 50, right? And what I have realized is about, across all my interviews, what sort of common themes were happening. The number one really interesting fact that I have for you is that about 20% of those guys were petrified that one of their friends would see them buy skincare at the supermarket. And that to me was really shocking. Another probably like 50% of those guys, they only use skincare because their girlfriend told them to. So
it's just, it just doesn't exist, doesn't it? Yeah, it's crazy. It's mad, yeah.
Yeah. And then the other, like, what are we up to? Like 70%, right? So like the other 30%, they're just confused. They're overwhelmed. They might see that they've got a problem, but they're not exactly sure how to fix it. And so you've got these guys who, you've got the guys who use like the real cheap, does the job of soap and water. And then you've got the guys that bunny hop between loads of different brands, probably spending like quite a lot of money. But obviously it's not working because they keep changing the brands, right? So what we're finding more and more is that guys are having more of a regime, and you might see it. You'll often see a lot of brands advertising now to the modern men, right? You'll see guys on their Facebook feeds being advertised to around like different sets and different, the Dollar Shaving Club and things like that. So you can see it's becoming a lot more acceptable. However, it's still a very confusing market to be in as a consumer, because now we're just getting a tsunami full of different products. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think you've really found a niche that is slowly growing, because I know growing up, even in the last few years, from kind of high school and living in Christchurch, I don't know if it's any different from living in Christchurch to living in Wellington, but I feel like the demographic is slightly different. But I feel like it is more acceptable in Wellington as a man to be seen, groomed, looking after yourself, using skincare products. Like myself, I use men's skincare. I actually do use Volt Elements. But I feel like it's even down to the individual city or the place in the world where you are, where it's seen as being more acceptable. Like if you imagine Central City, Wellington, you'd almost expect now to see men kind of using skincare products or, spending $50 at their barbers getting a haircut. But if you go to rural New Zealand, like in a small town, you could just not picture that happening. And I'm from rural New Zealand, and I know that for a fact, that if you were super groomed as a man using skincare products in like rural New Zealand, you'd probably get ridiculed. and your friends, your family may even make fun of you for that. So it's kind of interesting, that dichotomy between, I guess, metropolitan, like a town and a big city, compared to rural, rural places in New Zealand. But with COVID-19 now occurring, Zaynah, and with everyone in lockdown, how has that kind of affected Vault Elements, and what are you doing to kind of adapt to the current situation?
Yeah, so before we get into that, I think that with the whole rural New Zealand thing, you can see that, these rural communities, even around the world, like they're still struggling with saying it's okay to suffer from like mental health problems, right? So I feel like the maturity there is still developing, but there's countries around the world where men are surpassing women in their skincare,
Wow.
yeah, and their
Yeah.
skincare, which is really interesting. So we've got like Denmark, which is one of the fastest growing. It's actually the second fastest growing in the whole world, so per capita. And then number one in the world is South Korea.
So this
So
is
there
for
are
men's skincare.
countries out there. Sorry?
This is for the percentage of men using men's skincare. Is that right? Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, the Pacific Rim. So definitely, I think New Zealand is one of those markets which is a bit slower to adopt, but we're slower to adopt a lot of things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's going to take a bit more time to see men's dressing tables full of really awesome grooming stuff.
Yeah.
With COVID-19, it really shocked me. I left my full-time job last year to pursue this full-time. No one in my family knew that I was leaving for that reason. They found out about a few weeks later, and I got yelled at quite a lot.
Yeah.
So I was bent upon it, right? I had everything sorted, I had a bit of money saved and everything, and I just could not predict it. And to this day, I'm still hearing from them, I told you so. You shouldn't have done this. So for me personally, I feel like I have to prove a point.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, Jordan, like for about 2 or 3 days, I was really like lost. Then I went into like super like depressed because I was like, what am I going to do? The government said we're not even allowed to sell anything. And then slowly, I started thinking, okay, the positives, right? The positives here is, one, if I can get through this, there's going to be plenty of other COVID-19 things in our lifetime, right? So I can get through it once, I can get through it again. Then the second thing that I did is prioritize myself. I don't think, especially as a founder of a company where you've got either one, as in you're the only employee, or you've got just a few employees, if you're not well taken care of, it affects your business so much. It'll affect your decision making. It'll affect like how much your confidence in spending money as well. So I made myself a priority, and my number one thing was set a routine. I had to get that down. I did set a routine. I went to, this is when we had some cafes open, went to a cafe, wrote down this routine, and I'd never used it. And the reason for that, it was just too early.
So
It was
talk to us a bit about this routine, Zaynah. Break down this routine for us.
There's nothing wrong with the routine. It was just, what should Zaynah do in this time? And I had things like work from 9 to 11, call a friend at 12, because I knew that the social thing was really important. From 12 to 2, work again, go out for a walk at 2 p.m, and then continue working till 5. So I tried to do that, but I was not having it because I think we're often really afraid to go through our own emotional cycle. And I hadn't finished from my feeling depressed and really lost cycle.
Yep.
Right? But I had to ride that out, and it was hard. And the thing that actually took me out of it, which I wish I could tell myself this when I was at that time, because I remember talking to Jordan, and I remember telling you I ate a whole bag of chips. Like, we're talking like big bag of chips. It was very out of character for me because I've been on this clean eating thing for a month or so now.
Yeah.
So I basically decided that I needed to contact my tribe, right? So my tribe would be like other entrepreneurs because they are going through the very similar things. Your tribe might be people around the health and fitness and well-being community, right? My family's tribe, they're all job people. So they were my closest contact that I was talking to, but their worries were completely different. I heard people say, oh, great, I can wake up at 9. But when I first woke up, I was just like, one, what's the point of waking up? I can't sell anything. And two, what am I going to do with my time?
Yep.
Because there's never enough time in the day for me to go and make some sales. So basically what I have done is I wrote out the wave. I talked to my other entrepreneur friends, and it wasn't even the fact that what was talked about, it was just the fact that people were feeling the same way, and that broke me out of my cycle. That's when I kind of found my organic routine, which was wake up in the morning, go for a walk, work till lunch, then have my lunch, make sure it's like a good quality, like lots of vegetables and things like that, because at the end of the day, you want to feel like you've done something good for yourself. And I'm sure you felt like this as well, Jordan, when you've had days and everyone else who's listening now, where you've worked and your butt hurts from working, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not from squats.
Yeah.
It's literally from sitting down the entire day, and your brain feels fulfilled, but physically you don't.
Yep.
So I made sure that I went for a walk and then worked through to lunch, and then normally I get very absorbed in how much I like yesterday I wrote like 10 pages for a website specification thing, so I just borrow and I do my work. But at the end of the day, I do like a proper like online workout class.
Yep.
And that's been really helpful. So, and that's when I start to feel like physically fulfilled as well.
Yep.
So that was my organic routine, and that's sort of what I've been sticking to. So sometimes I think that we have the best of plans for us, and everyone tells us that, you know, you should plan. But in actual fact, I think sometimes you just have to experience what's right for you and then just repeat it. So, yeah.
I have to say, Zaynah, I definitely resonate with that hugely. Even just yesterday, leading up to this whole COVID-19 lockdown situation, you know, I've been working hard on the business and like so mentally absorbed with it, which has been totally fine because I love what I do and I love the people I work with. But if you become so absorbed in one thing for such a long period of time, I was noticing that I was just getting huge mental fatigue. And yesterday, I was in that position. I was sitting there and my butt hurt because I hadn't moved. But in this particular instance, I felt like I hadn't made any progress. Like I did my morning routine as usual, went for the run, listened to a podcast, had some breakfast, 9 through till probably 4 or 5. I was working, but just not making any progress. So just, I think being self-aware enough to know when your body is starting to burn out, both mentally and physically, is so important, I guess, in your longevity. Particularly with this COVID-19 situation, I think people have to become super self-aware of how they're feeling, because if you are just sitting around all day and you're not getting that physical exercise, you can kind of slip into that kind of mental state of stagnation, and you don't feel good. You just feel like you're just sitting around not getting anything done. So I think having some kind of structure or routine, but just being super self-aware is extremely important.
I 100% agree with that.
And I think, yeah, that kind of leads into that whole self-care aspects that I wanted to talk to you about. Obviously, before COVID-19, people in their mornings would get up, they, you know, would get their clothes ready, have nice clothes on, put their makeup on or do their skincare routine or whatever, and then go to work. But now with, obviously, the majority of people working from home, how important, do you think it's important that people still maintain that same kind of self-care routine, and do you think that's a benefit to people's mental health? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it's to do with the reason why we do all those routines at the beginning of our normal day, right? Why we shower, why we put that face of makeup on, all that skincare. And I would say a majority of the people listening now would think that they actually do it to feel good and confident about themselves. A bonus of that is that, you know, Jordan might go and compliment me and be like, hey, you're looking great today. But that's just a bonus. So I think that it's still incredibly important to maintain those routines and, you know, add on a little bit of extra. If you've got time to, for example, put on a bit of a face mask, then do it. Try and use this time to your advantage as much as you can. You've got a bit more downtime. You might notice that you're being able to work out a little bit more, so take advantage of that. I think that it's incredibly important for you to maintain a positive attitude in this around anything, whether it's self-care or not. I think that with self-care, it's something that definitely helps in a lot of your areas. It's a bit like when exercising is a form of self-care, but there's a domino effect around what exercising does for your body. So it's not just you exercising and looking good, it's you exercise and then you'll start to make naturally healthier choices, right? So then your body feels better, you feel mentally better as well. It's similar with self-care as well. A lot of people may think that guys don't really care about self-care, but based on the interviews that I've done, and I'll tell you this funny story, I interviewed my very good friend and her partner, both separately, around what she thought her partner's self-care routine was and her partner's self-care routine. And my friend said to me that, he'd probably spend maximum like $10 on a cleanser. I don't even think he washes his face at all. Sometimes I think he's stolen some of my moisturizer, but yeah, like I really don't think this is the right, topic for him. Then I went and sat him down. So to give you a bit of background, he's a real manly guy. He does building, he chops wood on the weekends, probably gets a few pies, but he's also in the medical field as well. So he's a very busy sort of guy. I sat him down, and at first he was a bit like hesitant about the questions around his skincare, and he said that, I only look at the medical reviews and things like that. And then at the end of the interview, she's there as well, and he says, actually, you know what, sometimes I do use Brianna's skincare. And she just looks at him, and he's like, yeah, sometimes I think, if it's good enough for her, it's good enough for me. So when
I love that so much.
Her cleanser, her moisturizer, her toner, I cut my nails, I trim my beard, and she's just staring at him. And he's like, yeah, so sometimes I do that when I feel like taking care of myself. And it was a really interesting conversation, and I think it was a bit of a breakthrough between them as well, because she didn't realize that that's what he does. And I asked him, why does he do that? And the whole thing was that he just wanted to take care of himself, and the reason why he wanted to take care of himself was because he just wanted to feel a bit more confident. So that's really the essence of why we do a lot of the things that we do, right? And like I said before, your confidence affects a lot of your other parts of your life as well. It affects how you carry yourself, how you talk to people, your decision making. And so if self-care can help in that way, then I think that's awesome.
That's honestly so powerful, Zaynah. That's really quite something. Because through Vault Elements, if you can help to start to break down the stigma, not just with men and women, or it doesn't matter, I guess, who you are. I think we want to try and get to the stage as a society where people can do their own kind of beauty routines or self-care routines without having to worry about getting judged. And what you just said kind of shows within just one couple, but I mean that may be true in couples throughout the world, where the man feels like he wants to take more care of himself, but not only does this kind of society perceive it that he shouldn't, but even his partner's really surprised that he felt that strongly about taking care of himself. So do you think with Vault Elements, looking forward now into the future, do you think not only are you going to be selling your products, but do you think part of your journey as an entrepreneur is to try and kind of break down that stigma that it should only be women taking care of themselves? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think that's definitely like my number one challenge. And when I first started out, I did the survey of about 30 different guys, and I found out that the reason why they don't use skincare is because they're not educated. It's not like as a girl, your sister might sit you down and say, okay, you need to cleanse, tone, and moisturize, right? With guys, they're just completely left to their own. They're probably a lot of the time still using the pimple cream that they used when they were teenagers. To this day, because their mum suggested it to them, right? So the difference is that guys often trust I call it their trust channels to provide them with advice. So things like with skincare, it might be their mum or their girlfriend or their sister or their barber that they might ask that, hey, what's good for me? So men's buying habits are very different to women. Companies like, you've got those big brands that have like a little small section for men. It really irritates me because I feel like it's just a lot of marketing and a lot of like, it's a bit of a trending area. Why don't we just add a few products into our line around that? So I feel like it's a bit unfair because men's skin is different to women's. It's thicker, it's more oily, it's prone to ingrown hairs because you shave half your face, every day.
Yeah.
Most women don't do that. So I think that, the skincare itself, the biggest challenge is convincing guys that it's worth investing in. The second is that it's the education around how to use it. And the third is actually choosing what's right for them. So it's a massive hill to climb because normally when you're starting a business, your customer base is already there. And with me, my customer base is like this tiny bit of the triangle, and I know the sweet spot. I just have to convince the guys that it's right for them. And the positives about men's buying habits is that once they find a brand, they're very loyal to it. So they often stick with it and they don't mind the investment. A lot of the guys that I surveyed, they spend like $100 on a moisturizer, but it will last them for 6 months to a year. So they're happy with that.
Yep.
And they're quite different to women who will like the little sample set and the little tester kits and things like that. So it's a challenge, I think. But for me, I have to remember that it's not just the men that I'm trying to convince to try out my brand, it's also the women in their lives as well. So yeah.
That is so cool, Zaynah, and I think it's so important and really awesome that your brand has an authentic message and kind of like an educational spin on it as well. So that's really cool. I've got one last question for you, okay? And this, obviously with this whole COVID-19 situation and this topic we're talking about in regards to self-care, what would be one piece of advice you give someone, be it men or women or, anyone listening to this podcast, what's one piece of advice you give to people in order for them to self-care a little bit more? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, so I think the surprising thing that I found out was men often want to do self-care, but sometimes they just forget because it's like they see it as an added step to their day.
Yep.
So my trick is, if you've bought a moisturizer and you keep forgetting to use it, or it's some new, skincare item or anything, chuck it in the shower or chuck it in in your car, anywhere where you can see it. And then you'll remember to use it. Because I find that that's often the time when we are somewhat stagnant. So you might be sitting in a traffic jam, or you might be just in the shower daydreaming. And that's when you'll actually remember to use it. So I think definitely integrate it with your routine and don't make it complicated. If you are happy with your moisturizer, that's fine. I would say definitely try and experiment, see whether or not a face mask is right for you, right? Because you never know until you try.
That's exactly right. Thank you so much, Zaynah. And before we go, where can people find you on social media? Where can people find Volt Elements?
Awesome. So we are online, so you can find us at voltelements.com. We're currently rebranding our website, so I'm really excited to be selling some awesome new things, such as not just skincare, but also even things like beard straighteners. That is very much trending, surprising to me, but on Google, it's one of the number one search items around men's stuff. So we are rebuilding the website at the moment. You can also find me on Instagram, so Volt Elements, and also Facebook as well.
Awesome. Everyone make sure you check out Zaynah and Volt Elements. I've personally used this stuff. It is really, really good. And obviously from this podcast that you've just listened to, it's got a really cool message behind it as well. The mental health, the education behind it is really cool. So thank you everyone so much for listening. If you want to find out more about this, obviously check out Zaynah on Facebook and Instagram and her website. And for Kaizen Fitness content, we've got our podcast. You can find us on Facebook at Kaizen Fitness NZ as well as Instagram, or check us out on our website at www.kaizenfitness.co.nz. But I hope everyone's having an awesome day. Hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and make sure you go out there and action it.